Exclusive, Meghan Markle in tears after shocking claims about Archie and Lilibet have been exposed. A former insider has allegedly revealed secrets that could rock the monarchy to its core. Royal experts are stunned, and the palace is staying silent. Tonight, we reveal the explosive allegations, the hidden truths behind the Sussex household, and why this could change everything. Stay tuned, because this story is bigger than you think. The story did not begin with a scandal, a headline, or a royal announcement. It began quietly, the way the most destabilizing controversies often do, with whispers. At first, they were confined to obscure online forums and fringe commentators, dismissed as cruel speculation aimed at a woman who had already endured relentless public scrutiny. But over time, the whispers hardened into questions, and the questions refused to go away. In recent months, those questions have returned with renewed force, propelled by what is being described carefully and without verification as a leaked personal account linked to someone who once worked inside the Sussex household. No document has been publicly authenticated, no original journal has been produced, and yet the mere existence of such claims has sent shockwaves through royal commentary circles, not because of what has been proven, but because of what remains unresolved. At the center of the storm are Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's two children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, and a growing online narrative that suggests the British monarchy may be facing a legitimacy crisis rooted not in rebellion, but in doubt. Sources close to royal media insist that Meghan has been deeply distressed by the resurgence of these allegations, particularly as they have begun to migrate from anonymous corners of the internet into mainstream commentary. The suggestion that her children's place within royal history could be questioned is not merely offensive. It is existential. For a monarchy built on lineage, symbolism, and continuity, perception alone can be as damaging as fact. What has fueled this renewed controversy is the claim that a former domestic employee, allegedly connected to the Sussex's Montecito residence, kept private notes during a period of intense pressure and secrecy. These notes, according to those repeating the story, describe inconsistencies in timelines, emotional tension behind closed doors, and moments that, if interpreted uncharitably, contradict the public narrative presented by the couple. It must be stressed, none of these claims have been substantiated. There is no confirmation of authorship, accuracy, or even existence. But royal historians note that the monarchy has always been vulnerable to rumors that challenge legitimacy, from false heirs to whispered affairs, because the institution depends not only on law, but on belief. And belief, once shaken, is difficult to restore. The origins of this controversy trace back years to Meghan Markle's first pregnancy announcement in 2018. What should have been a universally celebratory moment instead unfolded under the harshest possible spotlight. From the beginning, Meghan's experience differed dramatically from that of previous royal mothers. Her appearances were scrutinized frame by frame. Her clothing choices were dissected. Her body became public property in a way that many supporters argue crossed into outright cruelty. Critics of the speculation point out, correctly, that pregnancy varies wildly from person to person. Medical experts have repeatedly emphasized that there is no single correct way to look, move, or recover during pregnancy. To suggest otherwise, they argue, reflects deep-seated misogyny and unrealistic expectations placed on women, particularly women under public surveillance. Yet despite these valid arguments, the speculation persisted, not because of a single incident, but because of a cumulative effect, shifting dates, unclear explanations, and a level of privacy that, while understandable on a human level, proved disastrous in the context of royal tradition. The British royal family operates on ritualized transparency. Birth announcements, medical confirmations, and public appearances outside hospitals are not merely customs. They are symbolic acts designed to reassure the public that the line of succession is beyond question. When Harry and Meghan chose a different path, it created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, suspicion took root. The 2018 tour of Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, and Tonga is frequently cited as a turning point. Meghan was newly pregnant, navigating exhaustion, intense heat, and an unforgiving schedule. Supporters describe the tour as evidence of her resilience under pressure. Critics, however, have scrutinized the physical demands of the trip, comparing them to later descriptions in Prince Harry's memoir and questioning whether the timelines align. Medical professionals caution strongly against such armchair analysis. Pregnancy fatigue can fluctuate dramatically. Some women function at high levels well into later stages, while others experience severe symptoms early on. Recovery timelines after childbirth also vary enormously, influenced by genetics, healthcare access, and personal circumstances. Still, the internet is not governed by medical nuance. It is governed by pattern recognition, real or imagined. The release of Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, added fuel to an already smoldering fire. Intended as an unfiltered account of pain, loss, and estrangement, the book offered intimate glimpses into moments previously shielded from public view. But in doing so, it also opened the door to interpretation. Certain passages describing labor, medical interventions, and immediate post-birth experiences were seized upon by online commentators. Critics argue that these details raised questions. Defenders insist they were taken out of context, distorted, and weaponized. Publishing insiders have noted that memoirs, by nature, prioritize emotional truth over clinical precision, a distinction often lost in hostile readings. What cannot be denied is that Spare became a catalyst. For those already inclined to doubt, it was confirmation. For those sympathetic to Harry and Meghan, it was proof that no amount of honesty would ever satisfy their critics. Behind the scenes, public relations experts suggest the Sussexes found themselves trapped in an impossible dilemma: address the rumors directly and risk amplifying them, ignore them, and allow them to metastasize unchecked. The strategy chosen: limited response, selective openness, and eventual withdrawal from royal duties. May have protected their mental health, but it came at a reputational cost. In the digital age, silence is rarely neutral. It is interpreted. As the Sussexes retreated from official royal life, the monarchy itself entered a period of transition. Queen Elizabeth II's death marked the end of an era, and King Charles III ascended the throne amid questions about relevance, unity, and the future of the institution. Against this backdrop, any challenge, real or perceived, to the integrity of the royal line carries heightened sensitivity. Constitutional scholars point out that while Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet are far removed from the throne, in practical terms, symbolism matters. The monarchy's authority rests not on power, but on continuity. Anything that undermines that continuity, even through rumor, demands attention. This is why Buckingham Palace has not dismissed the controversy outright. At least not publicly. Silence from the palace does not indicate endorsement of the claims. Rather, it reflects a long-standing strategy: never legitimize speculation by acknowledging it. But royal watchers warn that this approach carries risks in a media environment vastly different from that of previous decades. Today's narratives are not shaped solely by newspapers and broadcasters, but by decentralized networks capable of sustaining controversy indefinitely. Meanwhile, the personal toll on Prince Harry is said to be profound. Sources close to him describe a man increasingly isolated, geographically, emotionally, and institutionally, estranged from his family, mistrusted by segments of the public, and fiercely protective of his children. Harry finds himself fighting battles on multiple fronts. For Meghan, the situation is described as emotionally devastating. To have one's motherhood questioned publicly, repeatedly, and without definitive resolution is a burden few could endure without breaking. Allies argue that the controversy reflects society's failure to respect boundaries. Critics counter that royal status carries obligations that cannot be selectively abandoned. And so the story continues to spiral, not because of what has been proven, but because of what has been left unanswered. As online speculation grows louder, a new and more unsettling question has begun to surface among constitutional commentators and royal historians alike. It is not about gossip or journals or memoirs. It is about law, ancient law, a statute few members of the public have ever heard of, but one that still technically exists within the framework of the British monarchy. A law that, on paper, grants the reigning monarch extraordinary authority over royal descendants. And that is where this story begins to move from rumor into something far more serious. What transformed this controversy from online speculation into something the palace could no longer casually dismiss was not a rumor, but a law. A law so old, so rarely discussed, that even seasoned royal observers once believed it irrelevant to modern Britain. Yet, as the allegations surrounding Archie and Lilibet intensified, constitutional commentators began quietly revisiting it, not because they expected it to be used, but because of what it symbolized. In 1717, during the reign of King George I, a royal prerogative was established, granting the reigning monarch theoretical guardianship over royal grandchildren. The law was designed for a very different era, one in which royal heirs were political assets and dynastic stability outweighed personal autonomy. Over time, it faded into obscurity, cited more often in academic texts than in legal practice, but crucially, it was never repealed. Modern legal experts are quick to stress that invoking such a doctrine today would be extraordinarily unlikely. It would face immediate legal challenges, public outrage, and constitutional scrutiny. Yet the fact that it still exists, even symbolically, has injected a new level of anxiety into the Sussex controversy, because symbolism is the monarchy's currency. As speculation intensified online, the narrative subtly shifted. It was no longer framed purely around Meghan's credibility or Harry's choices. Instead, it became about institutional safeguards. What mechanisms, if any, exist when doubt, justified or not, begins to corrode public confidence in royal succession? This is where the alleged DNA rumors entered the conversation, escalating the controversy to its most dangerous point. Claims began circulating that genetic verification had quietly been discussed or even pursued outside the United Kingdom. No evidence has been produced. No authority has confirmed such an action. Legal analysts emphasize that any testing involving minors would require consent, oversight, and formal procedure. Still, the rumors alone proved incendiary. Supporters of the Sussexes argue that these claims cross a moral line, turning conspiracy into cruelty. They point out that questioning the legitimacy of children, particularly children who did not choose public life, is indefensible. Critics counter that the monarchy's unique structure makes uncomfortable questions inevitable when tradition is disrupted. Caught in the middle is King Charles III. Unlike his mother, whose reign was defined by restraint and continuity, Charles inherited a monarchy already under strain. He faces declining public trust, generational skepticism, and a fractured family. The Sussex controversy presents him with an impossible dilemma: intervene and risk validating rumors, remain silent, and allow speculation to fester. Royal insiders suggest that Charles is acutely aware of the optics. Any move perceived as targeting Harry's children would be catastrophic. Yet doing nothing carries its own risks, particularly as online narratives harden into belief. The palace's silence is strategic, but silence is no longer what it once was. In a digital age, absence invites invention. Prince Harry's position has become increasingly precarious. Once protected by his role within the institution, he now exists outside it, without its shield, but still tethered to its consequences. Sources close to him describe a man deeply anxious about his children's future, furious at what he sees as institutional indifference, yet aware that his own disclosures have contributed to the current climate. Harry's estrangement from his family has compounded the problem. In previous generations, disputes were contained behind palace walls. Now, distance, geographic and emotional, has replaced dialogue. Without private channels of trust, misunderstandings calcify into narratives. Public opinion, meanwhile, has begun to fracture along familiar lines. Some view the controversy as further evidence of a hostile press determined to punish Meghan indefinitely. Others see it as a cautionary tale about rejecting tradition without fully understanding its function. Few remain neutral. Media analysts note that the Sussexes' long-standing strategy of selective transparency has reached its limit. Interviews, documentaries, and memoirs were intended to reclaim control of the narrative. Instead, they created a paradox. The more personal detail was shared, the more audiences felt entitled to demand answers. The irony is brutal. In seeking privacy, the Sussexes achieved notoriety. In seeking autonomy, they became more vulnerable. And in seeking to protect their children, they found those children placed at the center of an international debate they never asked to join. Legal scholars emphasize that no ancient law is likely to be enforced. No custody action is imminent. No DNA verification has been ordered. Yet they also warn that constitutional systems are sustained by trust, not statutes. Once trust erodes, laws once considered obsolete suddenly regain relevance. This is the quiet fear now circulating among royal advisors. Not that the worst-case scenarios will happen, but that the monarchy has lost its ability to decisively close a story. Every unanswered question becomes a seed. Every silence becomes a theory. For Meghan, the emotional toll is said to be profound. To have one's motherhood debated as a constitutional issue is a uniquely cruel burden. Allies argue that no amount of transparency would ever satisfy critics determined to disbelieve her. Detractors argue that royal life was never compatible with absolute privacy. For Harry, the cost may be lifelong. He has positioned himself as a defender of his family against institutional harm. Yet history may judge whether his rejection of royal norms protected his children or exposed them. As this controversy continues to evolve, one truth remains clear. The monarchy is confronting a challenge it was never designed to face. Not rebellion, not abdication, but sustained doubt in the digital age. And unless clarity replaces speculation, this story will not end with headlines. It will linger. Unresolved, corrosive, and quietly destabilizing. Long after the cameras move on, because in a system built on inheritance, even unanswered questions can become a crisis. Just now, Netflix quietly pulled the plug on Meghan Markle's show after shockingly low views. And what insiders are saying next could change everything. What was once promoted as Meghan Markle's defining Hollywood comeback has now reportedly collapsed behind closed doors, leaving industry insiders stunned and the Sussex brand facing its most serious credibility crisis yet. According to multiple sources familiar with Netflix's internal decision-making, the streaming giant has quietly canceled Meghan Markle's show after viewership numbers failed to meet even the platform's revised expectations. While no official announcement was made, the absence of renewal discussions, the sudden halt in promotional support, and the quiet removal of the series from internal priority lists have made one thing increasingly clear: Netflix has moved on. For Meghan Markle, this moment is more than a professional disappointment. It is being described by insiders as a turning point, one that exposes a widening gap between media hype and actual audience behavior. A gap Netflix executives can no longer justify. When the show was first conceived, it was pitched internally as a carefully crafted reinvention. Meghan would step away from royal controversy and reintroduce herself as a polished, aspirational media figure. Netflix executives believed they were backing a globally recognizable personality whose name alone would guarantee attention, engagement, and prestige. Early projections assumed strong curiosity-driven viewership, followed by sustained audience loyalty. That loyalty never materialized. According to people who have seen the internal analytics, the show suffered from rapid viewer drop-off, meaning large numbers of viewers clicked on the first episode but failed to finish it. Even fewer continued on to subsequent episodes. In the streaming world, this metric is devastating. Netflix does not merely track who watches. It tracks how long they stay, whether they return, and if the content becomes part of habitual viewing. Meghan's show reportedly failed on all three fronts. Executives were particularly alarmed by the data coming in after the first week. While initial curiosity was present, retention declined sharply. Repeat viewing was minimal. Social media engagement failed to translate into sustained platform activity. In short, the show generated conversation, but not commitment. One insider described the internal mood bluntly. There was shock at how quickly interest evaporated. As the numbers continued to disappoint, Netflix reportedly reduced promotional efforts. Supporters of Meghan Markle have since claimed this lack of promotion doomed the series, arguing the platform failed to give it a fair chance. However, insiders dispute that narrative, saying Netflix follows a strict performance-based model. Marketing budgets are not emotional decisions. They are reactions to data. When early metrics fall below internal thresholds, further investment is pulled back automatically. This created a feedback loop that the show could not escape. Lower engagement led to reduced promotion, which further limited discovery, reinforcing the perception that the series lacked momentum. Within weeks, the project reportedly became difficult for executives to defend during internal performance reviews. Behind the scenes, a more uncomfortable conversation began to emerge. When Netflix executives were reluctant to voice publicly, but increasingly willing to discuss privately. The question was no longer whether the show could recover, but whether the Meghan Markle brand itself still carried the cultural weight it once did. Several insiders say executives began distinguishing between recognition and draw. Meghan Markle remains instantly recognizable, but recognition does not always translate into viewership. In an era where audiences are overwhelmed with content, curiosity clicks are meaningless without emotional connection. Netflix analysts reportedly concluded that viewers were no longer investing in Meghan's narrative. Not out of hostility, but out of fatigue. This fatigue proved more damaging than criticism. Negative reviews can still drive engagement. Indifference cannot. Internal summaries of viewer feedback allegedly described the show as distant, overly controlled, and lacking spontaneity. Some viewers felt it tried too hard to shape perception rather than simply tell a story. Others complained it offered little new insight, recycling themes audiences felt they had already heard repeatedly in interviews, documentaries, and podcasts. Executives also reportedly noted that the series failed to resonate beyond a narrow audience segment. Despite Meghan's global profile, international engagement underperformed. This raised red flags for a platform that relies on worldwide scalability to justify high-profile contracts. As Netflix continues tightening its content strategy, canceling even established shows that fail to meet cost-to-engagement ratios, Meghan's project increasingly stood out as an expensive gamble that had not paid off. At a time when the company is prioritizing binge-worthy, high-retention content, her series simply did not fit the model. By the time renewal discussions were expected to begin, insiders say the decision had already been made. There would be no second chance, no retooling, no public debate. Netflix would allow the project to fade quietly rather than risk further scrutiny. The silence that followed was deliberate. No statements were issued, no denial was offered, and crucially, no future Meghan-centered projects were added to Netflix's development slate. In Hollywood, that silence is often the clearest signal of all. For Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the implications are serious. Their Netflix deal was once hailed as one of the most ambitious post-royal media partnerships in modern history. It positioned them as storytellers, producers, and cultural commentators with the power to shape narratives on a global scale. Now, insiders suggest Netflix is reassessing whether that vision was ever realistic. This reported cancellation also fuels speculation about the Sussexes' long-term viability in entertainment. While Prince Harry's personal storytelling has occasionally drawn interest, joint projects appear to be losing traction. Some insiders believe future collaborations, if any, may be scaled back significantly or redirected entirely. What makes this moment particularly damaging is timing. The cancellation arrives amid growing public skepticism, declining goodwill, and increasing competition for audience attention. Hollywood is no longer chasing celebrity. It is chasing engagement, and engagement is brutally honest. For Meghan Markle, this is not just about one show. It is about whether her media presence can evolve beyond controversy, reinvention, and curated vulnerability. Netflix's decision suggests the platform no longer believes that evolution will happen on its watch. And while supporters argue she was treated unfairly, the reality of streaming economics is unforgiving. Viewers decide quickly. Algorithms decide faster. And once a project falls out of favor, redemption is rare. As Netflix moves forward without her show, the message to the industry is unmistakable. Prestige names are no longer protected. Even duchesses are subject to the same cold metrics as everyone else. This may not be the end of Meghan Markle's media ambitions, but it is undeniably the end of a chapter she needed to succeed, and the fallout is only beginning. In the days following Netflix's quiet decision to abandon Meghan Markle's show, something even more revealing happened behind the scenes. The phone stopped ringing. According to multiple industry insiders, agents, producers, and executives who once eagerly floated new concepts tied to Meghan Markle suddenly went silent. Meetings that had been in discussion stalled indefinitely. Development emails went unanswered. Projects that had been described as early-stage promising were quietly shelved without explanation. This was not coincidence. It was calculation. Netflix's move, insiders say, sent a powerful signal across Hollywood. The Meghan Markle experiment was no longer a safe bet. Inside the company, the cancellation reportedly triggered a broader internal review of the Sussex partnership as a whole. While the original deal was framed as expansive and long-term, executives are now said to be reassessing whether the return on investment has justified the scale of the commitment. In private conversations, sources claim Netflix leadership has begun drawing clear distinctions between headline value and viewer value, a distinction Meghan's projects have struggled to bridge. One insider familiar with the internal discussions described the shift bluntly: the brand doesn't convert the way it used to. This reassessment has reportedly sparked uncomfortable conversations about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as separate media entities. While Meghan's lifestyle-focused project underperformed, some executives believe Harry's personal narratives, particularly those tied directly to his experiences within the royal family, still generate measurable interest. That distinction, sources say, is now shaping how future Sussex-related content is evaluated, if it is evaluated at all. Behind closed doors, there is growing acknowledgement that joint Sussex projects have lost their novelty. Early curiosity that once drove massive viewership has been replaced by skepticism, with audiences increasingly questioning whether new content offers genuine insight or simply repackages familiar grievances and themes. Executives reportedly worry that each new release now risks reinforcing audience fatigue rather than reigniting interest. Compounding the issue is the reputational risk. Netflix is acutely aware of how quickly online narratives can turn, and insiders say executives are wary of being perceived as overly invested in a figure whose public approval ratings appear unstable. In today's streaming environment, controversy does not always translate into clicks, especially when viewers feel emotionally disconnected. Several insiders point to internal sentiment analyses, reports that allegedly flagged a troubling trend. Audiences were no longer reacting strongly to Meghan Markle at all. Not positively, not negatively, simply disengaging. That disengagement has ripple effects beyond Netflix. Hollywood agents, according to sources, are increasingly cautious about attaching Meghan's name to new ventures without clear evidence of audience demand. While she remains famous, fame alone no longer guarantees funding, distribution, or patience. Studios want proof. Metrics, not headlines. This represents a sharp contrast to the atmosphere surrounding Meghan just a few years ago, when nearly every major platform appeared eager to partner with her. At that time, she symbolized disruption, modernity, and a fresh perspective on power and identity. Today, insiders say, she is viewed as overexposed yet under-delivering. A dangerous combination in an industry driven by novelty. The fallout has also reportedly intensified tension within the Sussex camp itself. While no public fractures have emerged, insiders suggest differing views on strategy have surfaced privately. Some believe the focus on controlled, image-conscious storytelling has backfired, creating content that feels distant rather than intimate. Others argue the problem lies not with Meghan's vision, but with an audience that has grown hostile and unforgiving. Netflix executives, however, appear uninterested in internal Sussex debates. Their concern is simple: performance. One source described a key internal meeting where Meghan's show was discussed alongside other underperforming titles. Unlike smaller projects, hers carried the added burden of expectation that had not been met. When comparisons were drawn, executives reportedly concluded that less expensive, less famous projects were delivering stronger engagement and higher completion rates. That comparison sealed the show's fate. What followed was a strategic withdrawal rather than a public confrontation. Netflix chose not to provoke backlash by issuing statements or engaging in spin. Instead, it allowed the project to disappear quietly, confident that attention would move elsewhere. In streaming, memory is short, and silence is often the most efficient exit. For Meghan Markle, this quiet erasure may prove more damaging than an outright public cancellation. There is no narrative to rebut, no statement to challenge, no controversy to reframe. The data stands on its own. More troubling for her future prospects is the perception that Hollywood has already moved on. Insiders say the industry is currently fixated on creators who feel raw, unpredictable, and culturally plugged in. Qualities audiences increasingly crave. Highly curated, image-managed content, once considered premium, is now often seen as sterile. That shift leaves Meghan in an awkward position. Her brand has been built on control, intentionality, and narrative precision. But the market is now rewarding messiness, humor, and relatability. Adapting to that shift would require a fundamental recalibration, one insiders are unsure she is willing to make. Meanwhile, questions continue to swirl around the remaining elements of the Sussex's Netflix deal. While no formal termination has been announced, insiders suggest future output may be limited, restructured, or quietly allowed to expire. Executives are reportedly reluctant to commit additional resources without compelling evidence that audience enthusiasm can be reignited. For Prince Harry, this moment may also represent a crossroads. Some industry figures believe his individual storytelling still holds emotional power, particularly when it departs from polished narratives and embraces vulnerability. Whether Netflix, or any major platform, is willing to explore that separately remains uncertain. What is clear is that the era of automatic greenlights for Sussex-branded content appears to be over. Publicly, Meghan Markle remains composed. Privately, insiders say the mood is far less confident. The cancellation of her show has forced an uncomfortable reckoning, not just with Netflix, but with the broader reality of an entertainment industry that has grown colder, faster, and relentlessly data-driven. This was supposed to be a reinvention. Instead, it became a warning. Hollywood does not wait. Audiences do not linger. And prestige without engagement is meaningless. Whether Meghan Markle can recalibrate, reemerge, and reconnect with viewers remains an open question. But Netflix's decision has already answered another one. The platform no longer believes the risk is worth the reward. And in an industry built on momentum, that belief can be devastating.